big question.
Now, moving on, Keith, the Fonterra signed up for another Chinese dairy farm. The Greens don't seem too keen on this sort of idea. What do you think?
I have difficulty with it, to be perfectly honest. I think they made their strategy very clear in a speech that was made to farmers in the UK about 3 weeks ago, where they talked about the future of international dairy, or the international dairy market, global dairy market, was going to be decided by countries like China and India. And obviously they've decided to invest in there to increase the weight of their presence in those countries. The interesting thing for me is in both countries they're moving to places which are short of water and short of soil, and losing both very, very quickly. Unless there's a massive transformation in the infrastructure, or the essential ingredients of farming, soil and water, in both those countries. China, for example, is losing water 40 times faster than it can replenish its aquifer. That is staggering. I wouldn't be investing in any farming in that particular part of the world. I would be making sure I had my arse well covered in New Zealand.
Yeah,
And you're saying that's why the Chinese are investing here.
Absolutely. Here, Africa, everywhere that they can secure some water.
Yeah, right. Well, moving right along on that issue, the Serious Fraud Office is having a look at Mei Wang and natural dairies. What's likely to come out of this, Brian? There are so many doubts, aren't there?
I've got absolutely no idea what's likely to come out of it, because we're just not privy to, you know, all these different financial deals that are being made. I think what is likely to come out of it, and I don't know what Keith thinks about this, but a political decision rather than a commercial decision.
Oh, I think the national government's very keen for these farms not to be sold. I think every bow and every arrow in the quiver is being used to fire shots into this. They really don't want the sale to go through, because it would be a political disaster. Yeah.
There was a letter writer, Ross Robertson, in the New Zealand Herald just recently. He was talking about why were we so reluctant to let overseas investors in when it came, push came to shove. Local investors didn't want a bar of farming. Do you agree with that, Brian?
Well, it's quite interesting. When I was saving up to try and buy a farm and shearing sheep flat out, I didn't like the competition that was coming from the Queen Street farmers.
For good reason.
Putting up the price of land for the tax advantages that were there. I think we've got to be consistent. You go to Australia, there's lots of New Zealand farmers there. They're in the United States. We've had a venture into Uruguay that hasn't worked as well as we had wanted to. And I think we've got to get with the global economy. And OK, there are areas where people sort of want to stop, and we've looked at this Chinese situation now. But you know, getting used to the global economy is something that not every New Zealander
taking a bit of doing.
Yes, it is taking a bit of doing.
Right. Now, Keith, moving on. Damien O'Connor, he's backing Federated Farmers' calls for an independent review of biosecurity systems. We've had a few sort of minor glitches. Is the situation really that bad?
It is, and it's worse than bad. I think it's absolutely appalling. Every time I've had anything to do with biosecurity in New Zealand, it's been a joke. As a journalist writing stories, I just find their incompetence is beyond belief. If you know, we always laugh about bureaucracy. This is bureaucracy writ large, and we depend on it. You know, economically, the farming sector, the sorts of things that happen in New Zealand that are allowed to continue happening are just bizarre.
So you'd be more in favour of some more stringent action rather than just an independent review, would you?
I think an independent review is a good place to start, and I mean a seriously independent review, a scientific review. There's too many scientists within this department who finished their degrees 20 years ago and haven't even picked up a comic since then. You've got to be abreast with what's going on.
What do you think, Brian? Do you think things are as bad as Keith is saying?
I don't know. Look, if you look at Australia, for instance, and what they've done to our apples, is that scientifically based, or is that... No, it's not. And we've got television programs telling us how marvellous our biosecurity is. And,
so who do you believe?
So that's the PR
from... Who funds the program?
I think it's something that we've got to keep constantly under review. There's no doubt about that. And a failure, such as having foot and mouth disease here, would be absolutely disastrous.
Absolutely.
So I line up with Keith on an independent review as probably a good place to start, because I think it's something we need to keep constantly under.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, Brian, just getting on to bureaucrats, which Keith was mentioning. Gordon Levitt from Wellsford, very well-known farmer. His new organisation, as reported in the Farmers Weekly, the Landowners and Contractors Protection Association, which he said is been designed to fight bureaucratic interference at all levels. How do you think he's going to go?
Well, he's got a really colourful record, Gordon, as far as this was concerned. I think before ACT even came along, was there a party called Liberal Reform or something like that? They were to the right of National anyway, and Gordon was a candidate many years ago, so he's running true to form.
Yeah, another interest besides his Romney breeding.
Well, I was going to say, in between times, he's been an absolute innovator as a farmer. And, you know, he's put a lot of his own money and own resources into breeding sheep that are superior when it comes to not having to use chemicals on them. And,
so once he gets his teeth into this issue, maybe we'll see some action.
We'll see some action. Whether
how successful he is, we'll wait and see. Yeah. Coming up, it's you beauty or a bollocking. See who gets a hug and who gets a hiding, metaphorically speaking, when we come back. Welcome back to Straight Talk. Now it's time for you beauty or a bollocking. Brian, what do you have for us this week?
Well, I think we've got to give real credit to Federated Farmers over the last month or so. Their response to the Southland climate disaster and to the Canterbury earthquake has been fantastic.
They were certainly out and about, weren't
Don
they?
Nicholson showed great leadership, the staff behind him. They've done a really great job. And look, every time there's a storm at lambing time, you'll get a whole lot of people come on and say, why do they lamb at this time of the year? We lamb much later than we used to, as a generalisation, and we still get caught every now and again. But I think Federated Farmers did a really great job.
Good one. What do you think, Keith?
I think they did a great job. You know, I've been one of the first to criticise Federated Farmers in recent months, but I would have to say that they were superb, because a lot of media, and I think this is part of the problem, we don't have enough people with agricultural sensitivity in media, just were firing both guns at the farmers. And it was a bizarre storm, and I thought that Federated Farmers handled it really, really well. They gave sensible replies. They supported the farmers right across the range. I thought it was great. That's what they should be doing. There
was a lot of good activity in terms of rallying farmers together, putting on barbecues, letting farmers get together, just take a bit of time out from the turmoil they were dealing with at home, just to have a break.
If you've got a problem, there's nothing like talking about it as far as therapy is concerned, and getting together really did help, I'm sure.
Which is great. Now, what about you, Keith? Have you got a bollocking or two for us this week?
I've got a couple of bollockings, actually. I still can't believe that the CEO of Fonterra is getting $5 million a year as income at a time when most New Zealanders are screaming about the price of butter. I just, you know, this is PR disaster of the worst form, and farmers need good PR at the moment, and this sort of thing is just terrible.
So do you think there's a really good case for Fonterra dropping prices on the local market in order to, you know, build a better support base in terms of the average New Zealander feeling more ownership of Fonterra, if you like?
Completely. I would suggest that it's going to become a political issue in the next election, and there will be a lot of bruising going on, and I think it's going to become something that Fonterra may regret.
What do you think, Brian? Farmers would be reasonably happy with the idea that Andrew Ferrier has steered the company through the global economic crisis with barely a dent, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of support among the farmers for Fonterra. They'll say that they have to pay an international salary. personally, I've got a real problem with people getting paid millions and millions. As my dear wife says, you know, people get paid $2 million to wreck a company, and she could have done it for 50,000.
She'd give them a good deal.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Now, Keith, I believe you've got your second.
Well, the other one, and it's actually it's a salutary lesson in this call that we often have for overseas investment in New Zealand. Pernod Ricard, the biggest drinks company in the world, second biggest drinks company in the world, has recently quit Gisborne and quit a number of large brands, including Corbyn's. They dumped them for a bargain price. They made the press release at 7:30 on a Wednesday night. That was an interesting idea.
That's timing.
So we know they were trying to nip out the back door. Whether this is the rats leaving a sinking ship, I don't know. But the lesson is quite clearly that this was a company that invested in the New Zealand wine industry and is prepared to bail out as soon as the going gets a little bit tough. And you could argue that their agenda was never the New Zealand wine industry. It was getting in on the Sauvignon Blanc success story, which they have successfully screwed by dumping prices all around the world and then bailing out. That's what you get for overseas investment in land-based industry in New Zealand, where the overseas investor doesn't give a toss. So
the moral of the story is, I guess, more questioning when these large international entities come in to the country in the first place. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just making sure their intentions are honourable.
You know, I would argue, as Brian was saying earlier on about Queen Street farmers, if you're not a farmer, you shouldn't be owning a farm. You shouldn't be running a farm. If you're prepared to come here from Greece or Turkey, I don't care where, buy a piece of land and be a farmer in New Zealand, you're tied to that bit of land. The decisions you make are going to be important around the land and the community you live in. If head office is Paris, why would you give a toss about growers in Gisborne?
Surely a large entity like this company, they would have been welcomed with open arms in terms of the commercial might they could put behind some of the brands that they came into.
That's always the argument, but of course they're industrial producers. The first thing they do if they can't sell the volume they've got is dump the price. So the little guy that's doing really well and getting a margin...
Yeah, so that's, that didn't work out.
Well, never works.
To balance you up, I have two you beauties, two Nuffield scholars announced just recently. They both look to be very worthy candidates in terms of looking into issues such as milk quality and also environmental situations overseas. And my second you beauty is the funding boost for the Land Care Trust. These people do a great job, often unheralded.
You could add the Nuffield organisation to your beauty, couldn't you? Because they've done a magnificent job over the years.
Over many years, yes indeed, Brian.
I'd like to know what's happened to Nuffield tractors.
Brian will know.
Morris probably sold them to someone else for
I to drive a Nuffield.
Memories. That's all we have time for on this edition of Straight Talk. Remember to check out my weekly blog on the website, country99tv.co.nz. Thanks to my guests, former Federated Farmers President Brian Chamberlin and freelance journalist Keith Stewart.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for watching. Catch you next time.